Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the next 2 hours of the most incredible information I believe you'll find anywhere on the planet, especially on the internet radio. I'm your host, Dr. H. Ruat, and yes, indeed, this is the story behind the story. Yeah, golly, I want to get into some real hard-hitting information. I have a guest lined up tonight. I shouldn't say lined up. He wrote a short 48-page book that I've been reading in conjunction with my investigation into what the heck is going on in Antarctica. You know, that land down under? I mean, way down under, for those of you listening in Australia. I mean, way down under. The frozen continent of Antarctica. We're going to tell you some stuff that's going to raise some eyebrows here tonight, I promise you. Like anything else we talk about here on the Story Behind the Story, folks, just listen, I hope, with an open mind. Open your mind to possibilities. And we ask you just to do your own homework and research. You'll find some interesting things. What I do is I like to think of myself, at least, as an investigative reporter. I started out doing the show, as you may know, 20 some odd years ago. I worked for a daily newspaper as a reporter. I was very much frustrated with my independent stories that I dug into. I mean, I presented them in good format. I mean, it's grammatically speaking, good format. The editor of the newspaper was my good friend. His name was Warren Anderson. Warren and I researched the incredibly hot topic of, yes, ladies and gentlemen, satanic ritual abuse inside of Utah's largest religious organization, the Mormon Church. We tried to be very neutral, very objective in our reporting, but there are victims. There is things going on with that you can't just turn a blind eye to, or so I thought. So I worked with my editor, Warren, and I wrote him, but he basically edited out what could or couldn't be controversial. We had it all set to publish in 14 segments, an ongoing series of investigative journalism that he said could very well be Pulitzer Prize winning, that type of good scholarly information. And the owner of the newspaper put a kibosh on it and said, this is not going to ever be published. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. There's just certain things that any publication in a newspaper will just not touch. This is one of them. And that began my journey, ladies and gentlemen, into alternative media, into broadcasting. We can't publish it in a newspaper. Let's talk about it on the radio. This is, after all, supposedly America. We have freedom of speech, don't we? Isn't that the First Amendment? Do we not have the right to tell stories and research those stories and make sure the stories are true and accurate? You see, you can't go into a crowded movie theater and start yelling fire if there's no fire. I mean, that's just irresponsible and dangerous. And we don't do that. So that began my journey, ladies and gentlemen, into reporting, first of all, the excessive nature of this satanic ritual abuse, the trafficking of children and sex slaves from third world countries, and even in America. So we're not immune to that. If you don't have family, if you're kind of out there, kind of almost a homeless area, nobody cares what happens to kids. Really, there's many of these kids aren't even on school rolls, or they just turn up missing. And folks, this is the big tragedy of the Pizzagate thing we reported on with my guest host, Alex Studer, who is with us here tonight. We're going to have the pleasure of talking with Alex. He's on the line holding with us as well. We're going to talk about Pizzagate a little bit. But folks, it all evolves around one thing, and this is not conspiracy theory. I'm telling you, folks, this is science. This is fact. The world as we know it, and this is what has led me over 25 years of research. I'm here to tell you, At the very top of the political food chain worldwide, there is a cabal, a secret society of, let's call it what they are. They're devil worshippers. Ladies and gentlemen, they're satanic ritual observers. Call it a cult, call it whatever you want. It's very real and it's very powerful, and they hate with a passion. They kill people, folks. They kill people that come out with the truth and to expose them. They control the media. They control the newspapers. They control my little Southern Utah newspaper, The Spectrum. They wouldn't allow the information to be published. They talk about such things as we got to protect our people. Anything you want to publish about the truth about such things as the Holocaust, for instance. Oh no, you can't touch. You can't analyze that. It's anti-Semitism and hate speech, they say. And so on the spiral goes. People become less and less informed. They become more and more dumbed down and hypnotized and brainwashed. And so they believe the great lie, that everything that we talk about this subject is some wild, crazy conspiracy theory, and give them no heed. They're just crazy. They should be locked away in a mental institution for the sake of all concerned. And believe me, folks, I have gone through that. I have been personally attacked and marginalized to the point of nearly being forcibly committed to an insane asylum over this topic. And that just proves it even more that it's accurate and it's their Achilles heel. They don't want the people to know about it. They don't really care if you know about it. They really don't. They kind of glory in that. But try and warn the masses, try to wake people up to the fact of what's really going on in this world, and they'll start taking personal action against you. And believe me, I've been there, done that. And to a certain degree, also, my guest host, Alex Studer, has been the subject of attacks along the same way. But he knows what I'm talking about. He's kind of documented some of the attacks against me over the years. And
most certainly.
Hi, welcome, Alex. Welcome.
Good evening, and thank you again to have me with you.
Oh golly, it's so good to have you on the air because I'm still battling this. I got some bronchitis. I might have to start clearing my throat in a few minutes. But be that as it may, Alex, how are you tonight?
I can't complain if I did. No one's listening, but things are good. I'm enjoying a minute of dry weather out here in the very wet left coast, and all in all, things are real good. Lots to talk about tonight. Again, thank you for having me on.
Alex, thanks again. You're always there to fill in, and when I have to travel and do my I got to earn a living still. I got to sometimes travel and do lectures and talks and do seminars. I do provide, even though some people say I'm crazy, right? I still do provide CE, continuing education courses for chiropractors and others. So I do that, and so I have to go. And most of the time, it's Friday nights, Saturday nights, and I've got to be back in. So you're my most able feeling, and thank you so much for that, Alex.
Well, it's an honor again, and I'm very humbled. I keep telling people, that I'm your substitute co-host, and the certain people in the know are like, no way, they don't believe it. They're like, how do you even know that guy? You're a screwy musician. How do you know this very achieved researcher, science guy? And I'm like, well, one thing led to another, and then I honestly can't explain it, but again, it's a very humbling experience, and I'm very appreciative.
Well, there's no profession, there's professionals, there's just is. If you're hungry for the truth, we started out getting to know each other by our joint research in exposing this fake flu influenza scandal.
And they're back.
Yeah, we debunked that, and we continue to debunk it. This lab virus is your website. You made that. Now it's kind of become a clearinghouse compendium. All these incredible stories, not the least of which is Pizzagate. Let me just go in the way of the news. I have my Salt Lake Tribune newspaper here. I gotta share. I gotta tell you because I knew this was going to happen, back. I says, I bet you anything that the week that Trump is inaugurated, that things will start happening. Netanyahu will and Israel will begin their settlement building, and yeah, here it is. This is written by Tia Goldenberg. Goldenberg. Any clues as to what that possibly what persuasion she is? But anyway, she's Associated Press out of Jerusalem. And here's the article. Headline: Israel okays 2,500 homes in West Bank settlement. Israel said Tuesday it approved 2,500 new settler homes in the West Bank, signaling a major ramp up. Now this is the day after the inauguration. Okay, this is what's so crazy. Signaling a major ramp up of construction just days after the swearing in of U.S. President Donald Trump, whose election has emboldened the settlement movement. Quote, Trump is expected to be more sympathetic to Israel's settlement policies than the fiercely critical Obama administration, and has also vowed to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to contested Jerusalem. Israel's nationalist government has welcomed the prospective change in policy, but it also risks igniting Palestinian or even regional violence. Okay. Well, I won't read the whole article to you. That gives you the hint of it. Then there's a little subsection here from the Associated Press when they asked Trump for his take on what's happening in Israel. Trump's silent. He says, "Quote: The Trump administration declined Tuesday to take a position on Israel's latest plan to expand Jewish settlements on land claimed by the Palestinians, breaking with past White House criticism of such construction, but leaving its own policy unclear." And the last paragraph, let me just read this. Quote, every U.S. president since Jimmy Carter has taken the position that settlements in the West Bank and Gaza, which the Palestinians claim for their future state, are, quote, illegitimate under international law, close quote. Of course it is. I mean, come on. The UN voted and condemned this, 16 votes. Obama's administration refused to veto that. It became that. I mean, this is one of the things that Trump was really strong on in his campaign. He promised to do, what he's doing, and he's following through on it. What do you think?
And let us not forget that his very first act after winning the election on November 8th, his very first phone call was to Bibi Netanyahu. That should be very indicative of where this is all going. And folks, none more current an example of cognitive disconnect in the American population than to listen to him talk about building a wall with Mexico and say, oh, America, we're not going to have to pay for that wall. We shouldn't pay for that wall. Well, guess what, folks? We've been building Israel's wall for years.
Yes. Well, I got to. I don't want to talk about Trump so much, but I did post what I posted on the week before his inauguration. I did my research into him. The 66th floor penthouse, 66. And here Ivanka, his daughter's married this Jared. I won't this, and now Jared is the official chief of the administration. He's right there in the White House, and he's being sent over there to broker the peace accord with the Middle East. I mean,
what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, come on. It's absolutely, again, I follow the biblical prophecies, and it talks specifically in Daniel about this pact. This Antichrist will make this pact with for peace, but he'll come in peace, but he'll bring war. So that's, I mean, to me, it's fulfilling biblical prophecy
I
completely.
don't disagree, and I love the show that you did about the gematria and his name and all that, and it fits. I don't like it as much as the next person, but I have to agree, and I'm sure uh, our friend Tex Mars would also agree with you on that.
What's funny is I've asked Tex to call me on this because I sent him a whole bunch of information. Tex is really quite silent on this, and I know him and the mouth Alex Jones. I mean, they're buddies. They're in Austin, Texas. They just are. I don't know.
I think.
You think? I'm telling you, I just got question marks because he should be all over this with Trump like stink on a bug, but he's been kind of silent about it. I mean, what is going on with that? Time will tell. Maybe he's a little bit ill. I don't know. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but I question what's going on, especially in light. Remember at the inauguration, you watched that. You had the Mormon Tab Choir, the Motab Choir, right? There was a lot of controversy here in Utah when the announcement was made. You know, the Tab Choir flat out ignored Obama's two inaugurations, just flat out ignored them. They didn't come, though they were invited to. I understand they refused to. They were there during the Bushes, of course, and the Clintons, but they just didn't, whatever for whatever reason, refused to not come to inauguration. But they announced that they were going to be there for Trump's inauguration. There were about 20 of the women's singers there in the Motab that said that they weren't going to go, and if they were required to go, they would resign their membership. In fact, one woman did resign and gave a really kind of a strongly worded resignation letter that she couldn't look herself in the face if she went and supported and sung at Trump's inauguration. Well, here's the story behind the story of that. Okay, one of the leaders, one of the 70, came to the Tabernacle Choir and gave them basically a talking to from authority position. Okay, you see, every president. I don't know how far back this goes, but they've done the genealogical research for every one of the American presidents, going back to Washington, George Washington. Okay. Now, as you may or may not know, listeners, the Mormon Church keeps an incredibly detailed genealogical database. These ancestry.com websites and all these things you pay for your ancestry, well, it stems out of the Mormon churches. They sell that information off. They have the most complete and complex genealogical library. And that's because the Mormons believe that you have to do your temple work for your dead ancestors. That's what goes on in Mormonism. Okay? So they have these detailed archival records. I mean, they've since their inception since the 1900s, early, they've gone into every nation really that has been open to this and gone and just mined their genealogical records and database, so they can, and then of course it get back to a certain level and certain roots that are well documented. Then it goes back and measures into the biblical record. Now here's the key thing: what was shown to them, without getting into any great detail of doctrine, right, is the genealogical record of Donald J. Trump. Guess what, folks? He goes back to King Henry II. His line goes directly back, and this is what's amazing. Both his maternal side, Mary MacLeod, who's Scottish, right, and his father Frederick Christ, yes, Christ, Drumpf, which changed his name from Drumpf to Trump, the Trump card, right, the 53rd card in a 52 card deck of the tarot card, right? The, both of those lines, both Mary MacLeod's and Frederick Christ Trump, go back to King Henry III, which is the Plantagenet line of the British royalty. Now, once you hit into the Plantagenet line, their records go right back, because the Plantagenets claim they come up of the line of Judah. They go directly back to such notables as King Fawk, the last Caucasian red-haired, red-haired, ruddy-complected king of Jerusalem. That's this direct line, and then it goes back. King Fawk, you see, goes back and through the Plantagenet line directly to David himself. So this is the royal lineage of Donald Trump. Now, they did the genealogical research for Obama, but the trail fizzled, and well, of course it fizzled out of Kenya. There's no records in dark Africa going back very far. So they presented the Mormon Church presents in a kind of creepy little ceremony. They provide a leather bound, really nice, copy to the incoming president of their genealogical line. Now, they did that with the Bush, with George W. and George Herbert W. And amazingly, their line ties into Mittens Romney line, but it doesn't go back to David. Donald J. Trump's line goes back, and this you know, I pulled the history of King Fawk out of there's paintings of this last king of Jerusalem. He was in Jerusalem, crowned king of Jerusalem, under the Crusades, financed by the Roman Church. Now, okay, bankrolled by the Roman Catholic Church. Now there's pictures of him, and I got to tell you, Alex, I got cold chills. I got willies because it looked like Trump. The facial, it looked like it was just like Trump is reincarnated. Even had funky hair.
So David 2.0, as it were.
Yeah, it's like, are you kidding me? What is going on with that? King Fark was a was his fame was as he was a famous killer of Muslims. He killed his contingent of knights were fierce in the Crusades. They killed thousands and thousands of Muslims.
Well, we're definitely on par for that to happen.
I mean, it's weird stuff. I mean, what's going on? Then you get this group of rabbis that are okay. There's a group of rabbis in Jerusalem that are ultra orthodox. They believe themselves to be the scribes of antiquity, and they very well could be. Okay, going back, tracing their posterity down. After Titus and Roman legions massacred so many millions of Hebrews back then in 70 AD, there were certain scribes that took the sacred records and just the Tanakh, the Old Testament, and escaped out of Jerusalem. Okay, they claimed to be those core. Their ancestors were those, and so they claim to be a direct line of the scribes. Now, what's important about that is every Hebrew letter, okay, has a specific numerical value. Okay, the study of that is called gematria, and these scribes count more about the numbers because they say you can study the Tanakh, and especially the great prophet of Isaiah and other Isaiah scrolls, and go into the number structure, and it just opens up a whole multiple layer of meanings. Okay, it's like the more you dig into it, it's like a mine. You go deeper and deeper and find nuggets and nuggets of truth. So these scholars have been these scribes have been looking and piecing together the names of people on the world stage, the names, their dates of birth, the whole thing. And I'm telling you, Alex, there's all these Christians were saying Obama's the Antichrist, Obama's this or whatever. These people were just saying Obama's nothing. The scribes in Jerusalem were saying no, it doesn't fit. These scribes are saying Donald Trump could very well be the Messiah, because the Messiah figure to these scribes is the Antichrist figure to the Christians. Okay,
right? Yeah. And it's interesting that you're on this topic today. I know there's so many things that we can and hopefully will be talking about. It's just interesting that at this very moment in my hand, I'm holding I don't know if you listened a couple weeks ago when I subbed in for you. I was reading some text by the late author Michael Collins Piper regarding JFK. Well, I have in my hand the very last thing he ever published, and it's called "The New Jerusalem: Zionist Power in America." And I'm about halfway through it right now, but it it pretty much describes to the letter, in almost a very prophetic fashion, all that we're going through and we're talking about right now.
Well,
Just wanted to say that.
yeah, I appreciate what Mr. Piper did in his publications, and I agree 100% with much of what he wrote. And I was just shocked beyond belief when I wanted to interview him on this program, on this show, and he was very, I don't know, very derogatory to me personally. He says, "I'll never go on a show anybody believes that Nazi Germany conquered America." I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, let's talk about it. I'm not saying they conquered America. I'm just talking about Operation Paperclip and how Nazi scientists came in, especially here in Utah. That's what I'm talking about. Let's talk about it because it might help you." And he just basically hung up on me. It was crazy.
I don't
So,
understand that because that those actions are so contradictory to everything that I've read that he's written so
yeah,
far.
yeah, that's what shocked me. I was shocked. I was like, what in the world? He's just, I mean, it was a knee-jerk reaction, I thought, and he didn't understand completely. He just looked at my website and said, "Oh, Nazi Germany conquered America," but didn't really get into the meat of it. That's what I thought. But he
Well,
wouldn't even talk about it.
yeah, sadly, I guess he passed in 2005, so we'll never really know the answer.
Yeah, it was in
Yeah,
2004 that I talked to him, a year before he
right.
passed, and that. So,
So
so
that's
anyway,
the year that he wrote this book that I'm holding. And if you haven't read it, True, I hope you have. But it's so pertinent,
well,
in
email
my
me.
humble opinion.
I have not read it. Email me a link. It does the New Jerusalem with a capital with a little N. I think prophetically, New Jerusalem is America and Babylon is New York. I mean,
And that's exactly the thesis that he presents here: is that America is the sacrificial lamb for the Zionist movement. Yeah,
he may have just been getting too close to the truth. I don't know, but I'm gonna tell you, man.
I'm guessing so.
Yeah, I really think what's happening with Trump is a part of a big picture of the Illuminati elite controlling things from the City of London power base, the House of Rothschild. Let me get into it and show you what this thesis. Listen, I've been for a long time, as you know, Alex, been studying and watching things about Antarctica. I'm telling you, there is so much to tell people about what's going on right now down there.
And
Strange things.
even stranger, and let me just point this out. We have this United Nations logo, right? And
Right.
it's these hearths of wheat surrounding an image of a map. Okay, it's not exactly what we call a globe map, is it? No, the map that's presented to the UN logo, it's known as an azimuthal equidistant projection. And one thing noticeably missing from that map is Antarctica. Where is it? Why is it not on the map? Discuss.
Well, let's turn to the Washington Post article because this is, like I said, there was a story behind this story. The story in the Washington Post. This was dated, golly, I'm not sure what. Oh, February 18th of 2016. So this was last February, not quite a year ago. So this is the headline is for Russia's church leader. A trip to Antarctica is not just a photo op. That's the headline in this February 16th article. And there's a little video they took of this happening. The penguins on the Antarctica beach. Of course, February in Antarctica is the height of the summertime there, so best time to visit it there. Okay, even the penguins were curious. The article says they waddled up for a closer look at their new visitor, who wore a parka and rubber boots along with his traditional black robes. A visit to an Antarctic research station Wednesday by the leader of the Russian Orthodox Church might seem like an extravagant detour for the 69-year-old patriarch Kirill, or Krill, like a fish, Kirill, right? After all, he had just wrapped up a busy Latin American trip that included historic talks with Pope Francis, the Jesuit Pope, ladies and gentlemen, in Cuba. But take a closer look at Krill, and the polar swing begins to make more sense. Krill has played a role at various times in various ways as an influential and reliable voice for Kremlin policies, including domestic crackdowns on dissident and military flexing in places such as Ukraine. Now, here's what's amazing about this, folks. Let's go back into some history. The Roman Catholic Church officially, I don't know what the date and time was, but many centuries ago, uh, ousted the Russian Orthodox Patriarch, who's Kirill is the equivalent in Russian Orthodoxy to the Pope and to Roman Catholics. The Russian Orthodox Christian Church Patriarch has been at odds. I mean, there have been wars fought between these two powers. The Russian the the Russian government and the Roman government have been, man, they've been fighting since they had their schism. Okay, they've been enemies. To have them, the two patriarchs, the two popes, basically meet together for the first time is groundbreaking. And pundits have said, well, this is simply just just getting along. It's Pope Francis's vision for ecumenical uh, love making. Okay, just everybody
Wrong.
gets together. Of course it's not that, but that's what the media wants you to believe. Something major is going on as far as you know this Russian. Now, the Russian post there in Antarctica is really the subject of discussion. I posted there. It should be on. I had Mr. Rowe post the YouTube link to this Russian documentary film on what happened with the Nazis there in Antarctica. Oh, an incredibly well done documentary. Of course, it's done in Russian, but it's translated subtitles in English. You got to watch that, Alex. That's really something. Really something.
I look forward to it. Thank you for the link. That'll happen tomorrow.
So let's finish up with this Washington Post article, then we'll jump into what this link has said. And I wanted Mr. Smith. This I don't know if that's even his real name. He posted this book on because he interviewed survivors of the Operation High Jump with the expedition in 1947 down to the Antarctica. And oh my goodness, talk about a story behind the story. What really happened in that Operation High Jump has been censored in big time censorship from the press. And amazing.
As well as the operation that followed it, Operation Fishbowl.
Yes. Okay. Now let's follow up on the story. This is again Washington Post with pictures and everything. Great picture of this patriarch Krill with the penguins. I mean, it's quite an amazing picture. Krill's encounter last week with the pontiff also carried a bit of Moscow's political hand. Okay? On a history-shaping level, it broke the ice between the Vatican and powerful Russian Orthodox Church, representing two sides of a nearly 1,000-year-old split in Christianity separating East and West. There was also, however, a distinct stamp of approval from the Kremlin. Russia is looking for any channels to build ties with the West and seek some outside validation for its aims. What is its aim? See, even as Moscow faces increasing international pressures over its reach into conflicts including Syria, where Russian airstrikes have aided the forces of President Bashar al-Assad. So, think of Kirill's sojourn in the Antarctic as both a once-in-a-lifetime photo op. It was splashed all across Russian media, and some boots on the frozen ground for the Kremlin. And here's the key part of this. Russia has expanded its presence in Antarctica in recent years, and also has expanded claims over the Arctic. Both both poles, Antarctica and the Arctic, part of an ambitious push to secure resources and plant the flag in some of the world's most remote regions. Now, Alex, why is this not? This is Washington Post article last February, almost a year ago now. And why is this not being talked about on TV, on the news outlets? This is huge. This is huge information. It really is. But instead, we're looking at, they're talking, oh, Russia hacked into the elections. Russia did this. Russia's back. But they're not talking about the plan that's claiming the research is doing in both Arctic and Antarctica. Why?
Well, the short answer to that is you look at the ownership of uh, WAPO, and it's not hard to figure out that they're pretty much MSM's version of controlled opposition. And they're going to say the thing that no one else will say only because they're going to say it in a controlled way.
Yes. Well, let's follow the story on. Again, this is Washington Post, liberal rag. Okay, here's what Russian state-run television emphasized, and the interview with Patriarch Krill. Quote, Antarctica is the only place free from weapons, military activity, or research into new means of human destruction. Krill told a handful of Russian scientists, explorers, and others at the Bellinghausen station research outpost, according to the Interfax news agency. Now, he came onto the land, and look at the point. Now, look at where this Billingham Station research outpost is, and lo and behold, it's right in the middle of Maud Island, which is where the Nazi maps are. This is a key point. Key point. Quote, this is an example of ideal humankind and proof that people can live without borders or arms or hostile competition, that we all can cooperate and feel like members of one big family. Does that sound like a New World Order talk to you there, Alex?
Oh,
Without
just
borders or arms or hostile competitions?
or personal property or yeah.
Yet, at the same time, Russia appeared to take out a stronger strategic interest in the region last month with the arrival of an oceanographic research ship, the Admiral Vladimirsky, on a Russian backed by Russia's Navy. The vessel reached Antarctic waters 6 months after Russia unveiled an updated maritime doctrine. It emphasized the Arctic as well as Antarctic as another front to counter NATO influence and expand Russian naval presence in the potential new shipping lanes opened by receding sea ice. Last week, Russia presented its claim on a wide swath of Arctic Ocean seabed to the UN. The Russian Ministry of Defense recently released footage of armed soldiers training on sleighs pulled by reindeer. Santa Claus. Oh, it has nothing on these guys. The Antarctic was not overlooked in the new policies, which included improvements on Russia's Antarctic research stations and the construction of new polar research vessels. The Russian news agency RIA Novosti reported. Quote, seeing that in the last few years there have been many new developments with regard to Antarctica, this has become a very important region for Russia, Russian Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Rogozin said in July. Much of the Antarctic attention involved long-range strategy rather than current gains. The continent holds vast mineral deposits, although a treaty currently bans mining them. The continent is also overseen by agreements that ban any permanent military presence, although some nations have made territorial claims. Michael Birnbaum in Moscow contributed to this report. Now, that's the story. Should we talk about the story behind the story, Alex?
Can I ask a question?
You bet.
Wasn't it the year 1948 that UN treaty was formed
Yes.
banning? Yeah, okay. Just checking.
Okay. All right. Let's scoop into this book. Okay. I made contact with this author, William A. Smith. This was actually copyrighted in 2015. Its title is Hitler's Antarctica, Antarctica UFOs. The Anenerbius Society, the Piri Reis, not Piri, P-I-R-I-R-E-I-S-A, that's not Pee Wee Reese, right? Piri Reis map, HARP, and other mysteries. Okay, this is an amazing book. It's a little book. You can read it in an hour. Here's the introduction. Quote, Hitler's life and his belief in superhumans or a superior race is well known, but the extent, and they can tell William is not a writer, the extent, it should be extent to which he and his Third Reich went to find these in reality is less known and mind-boggling. Hitler believed in the hollow earth theory, where according to legends, it is inhabited by a human race far superior and much more powerful than normal humans on earth. He intended to seek their help and use their superior technology. So that on every front, from stealth technology to nuclear power, Hitler's push for scientific success fueled the Nazi dream of a global Reich, a German empire lasting 1,000 years. Now, let me stop right here. Alex Jones, to me, let the cat out of the bag, and I don't listen to the guy because I know who he works for. I know why he's involved. Okay.
Right, and just a side note, I saw his face on Jimmy Kimmel the other night. He was at the inauguration.
Of course he was. Yeah. He says, and says you can see it on a video. I don't know if the video's still up there or not on YouTube, but he was on his one of his rants and he says, I believe in a new Atlantis, a new rising Atlantis. That's my dream. That's my goal. And well, heaven forbid, folks, that's what it's all about. What do you think the
Babylon.
Nazis? It's Nazism. I mean, that's exactly what Adolf Hitler was saying. The new Atlantis. It's whether it's a global Third Reich of 1,000 year reign, the whole the whole Jewish structure. Okay, again, this is where if you really dig deep, and you'll find some strange things out. Adolf Hitler, some of his top SS generals were Jewish.
And I'm just clarifying that I equate Atlantis with Babylon.
Yes, it's a code word for the New World Order. And really what it is. Okay? So, this is what this book establishes, is what Hitler did. And see, the Russians were the first really ones to go into Berlin, and they took control of Hitler's bunker. They got his papers, basically, most of them. Okay? And so this Russian documentary is very well done, exposing all of this. And that you don't read this in history books in America. All you read about in history books is how the Holocaust, killed 6 million Jews. That's the focus, not on what was going on inside of the government itself.
Yeah, never mind the fact that there weren't even 6 million Jews living in all of Europe at the time.
Yeah,
Just
there's so many things, Alex. There was a Jewish fellow back. Oh, this was back in the early '90s, late '80s. He was very, he wanted to go and do a documentary as part of a research project in his master's degree or something. He went back to Auschwitz with the film crew to document how they did this, how they killed all these Jews in the gas chambers and cremation and all this. This is a Jewish. He's wearing his yarmulke, for heaven's sakes. He's wearing his skull cap as he's doing this documentary film. And he comes out and he says, "Wait a minute. I'm doing the numbers. The numbers don't add up. There's no possible way to order to kill that many Jews." He said in his documentary film, there has to be about 500 to 1,000 more Auschwitzes.
Exactly. The math doesn't add up, and we've seen, we have the interview with Abe Finkelstein, the rabbi. We've seen, tons of testimony showing the math doesn't add up. There's a website anyone can go to right now called Holocaust Deprogramming Course.com.
Yeah. I was amazed at this because I followed this fellow. This is back when I was first starting into doing radio and writing exposés. I was shocked because, I got a copy of his. It was back when he had the VCR tapes. Okay, I got a copy of his VCR, and I said, "Wow, he's honestly." He was like, "What's going on with my people? They're being lied to." And so, you remember the Phil Donahue show? He
Oh,
was
sure.
yeah, he was a guest on Donahue, ostensibly to come up there and show the people what he was uncovering and answer, basically have his questions answered by some rabbis. Instead, it turned into let's kill the messenger. I mean, he had all these Holocaust survivors. This whole group came in and just suddenly became a castigation of him as a Jew, as a person, and how he could be such a traitor to his people. I mean, it became absolutely a referendum to kick him out of to say he's not really a true Jew, to have to even question these things. They wouldn't discuss the questions and the numbers and the structure that he brought out so very well. No, it was attacking the messenger and vilifying him, and that's where I began to really see a part of this myself and say, "Wow, this is flat out. This is not being honest. It's not being fair and being objective. There's a system, and that's what led me to do my research into who controls what and why, who pays the money for Phil Donahue. See, this is where I personally began to research it back in the 80s and 90s. Oh,
Which ultimately leads us to who created NASA and who creates the funding for them, for all how much money are we spending on Israel every day, and how much is going to fix water systems in Flint, Michigan?
exactly. Which brings us to the secret society. the You've heard of SS, the two lightning bolts, but that's not even touching the real on the secret society is called the Anunnaki. Doesn't that sound familiar, like Anunnaki? Anunnaki. It's Ahnenerbe.
Oh, but it's
Anu,
not the same. It's different because that one letter is different, so it can't be
yeah.
even associated. I have no idea what you're talking about. You must be crazy.
Again, like I said in the first part of the show, I challenge you to research this, folks, because you're going to be getting an eyeful, and your jaw's going to drop. The Anunnaki was an occult society formed by Hitler's highest ranking officials, whose highest level top secret intention was to explore the Antarctic region. Why? Because they had these maps. The Anunnaki had scoured libraries. They spent many months and even years in highest level Tibetan monasteries, finding out they had over 140,000 books of the nature of the hollow earth. Okay, so they began to there was a very high level secret society. Here's what Smith says in his book. Quote, the idea was to combine the ancient super knowledge and combine that to current scientific knowledge and make the Third Reich, quote, the untouchables. Even now, today, the secret services, whether it's the CIA, whether it's the Mossad, of whoever, the KGB,
The
I'm sure
Knights Templar.
Knights Templar, Putin, I'm sure is involved in this. Okay, ex KGB agent, top agent, Putin knows all about this. They searched for the Anunnaki secrets. It is no doubt that they attained great unknown knowledge, and sadly also destroyed some of it, mainly books. They literally burned them on a massive scale before it could be disclosed to the world. But many records of their quest for ancient knowledge are still hidden out there to be found and benefited from. According to the Anunnabi's beliefs and their structure and their ultimate secret society of Nazi Germany, there were people and civilizations much more advanced before the current records of the beginnings of humans. Somehow these civilizations got wiped out completely due to some natural calamity, and thus we humans had to start again from scratch. Okay? So what happens? What happened? Let's look now at the real facts of the Operation High Jump. Okay, we're going to.
I also want to suggest that, what was the first thing we did in the Iraq War? We went and invaded their history museum of natural history, and the ancient Sumerian records were all taken, and we are no longer able to access those.
Yes, there's again, it goes back to the series we did with author Peter Moon concerning the underground tunnels that connect Egypt with Iraq and also into Tibet and going down, of course, into Antarctica. And this is what we're getting at. That Russian documentary that when you watch that Russian documentary film, you see that, and this again is the Russians are have claimed that coast of land right where this goes, because what are they finding? Well, there's a flow of water that's fresh coming into the supercharged cold water there with the ice. These are warm freshwater rivers flowing out, and what they've carved these massive tunnels in the ice shelf. Okay, the only way to really get into that is to go in by submarine. And this is what that Russian documentary, they have the records of Hitler. They have those in their archives. They've kept those secure. This is why Russia's involved in that specific area, why they have claimed it, okay? And why it is that the CIA is telling Obama and now trying to tell Trump that Russia's a great massive threat.
Okay, but not just that area. If we're going to talk about Antarctica, we also need to be talking about Greenland, in my humble opinion.
On the north end, there is that other entrance on the north end. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're about ready to take a break, but let's just kind of give the preface of what Operation High Jump was, and then we'll go on to break. Okay, Alex. Now,
you got a minute.
World War II had just ended. Okay, the Japanese surrendered. Hitler had already been taken out years earlier, but at the end of 1946, operations began for Operation High Jump. 1947, and Admiral Richard Byrd did the Expeditionary Force. Operation High Jump is what it was called. It was one of the most powerful military expedition squadrons ever. It would be
largest naval fleet ever assembled.
It involved an aircraft carrier, 12 destroyers and surface ships, one submarine, okay, more than 20 airplanes and helicopters, and about 5,000 people on staff. Now, if this is just a scientific expedition, why have all this armor? These are military, and not only that, but look at the pilots that they handpicked the best ace pilots.
Going to break.
Yeah, what were they after, folks? You'll find out when we come back into the story behind the story. Stay tuned. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome back to the second hour of tonight's story behind the story. I'm your host, Dr. H. Ruad, and from Frisco Bay, the left coast, we have Alex Tudor, my guest host, my very ample host with the mostest, Alex Tudor. Yeah, hey, Alex. Hey, golly, yeah, we got to mention again, as we always do, we have no corporate advertising on this show, and never have, and never will.
Wait a minute, we're not going to break for a Coca-Cola ad?
Well, you can if you want. You can go take a sip that satisfies. I don't care, but no, we don't advertise on this show.
The show isn't paid for by McDonald's?
No, you can. We just don't. So the
Okay,
the
good.
the station is not corporate sponsored either. So the station only can survive with donations from listeners like you. And again, go to revolutionradio.com if you already listen to this on the online and click the donate button, and you'll get some neat. There's always neat stuff, whether it's seeds, whether it's silver, whatever, folks. You get something for your donation, but also just subscribe to the archives, and you can listen to all of this crazy talk about Antarctic secret bases and Operation High Jump, things that the mainstream media, I guarantee you, will not talk about. This is one of those, folks.
And we know that the hard way because how many networks have you been collectively kicked off of as of today?
I don't keep it's well, first of all, I started
It's
out
just
on
about every one of them, right?
well, it's what really started out bad is here, the story behind the story was originally broadcast live on KUCB radio in Southern Utah, Cedar City. We actually got nominated for twice for Peabody Awards. And those who don't know what that is, in the radio reporting field, Peabody is equivalent to, like, the Pulitzer Prize in writing. It's a prestigious award. We were nominated
Anyone
in our
watching late night comedy learned about it when Stephen Colbert won his.
well,
Yeah.
please give me a break. Of course, we never won it, but the nomination was there because we brought hard hitting things in. And again, I was offered syndication. I had an agent at the time, Miss B.K. Nelson, great. She syndicated Dr. Ruth Westheimer. Remember little Dr. Ruth? I have a
The
picture.
sex doctor.
The sex doctor, exactly. She had that little sex doctor show. So I was there getting the offer of syndication presented to me in Palm Springs, and I had to read the fine print and everything else. But I have a picture of me standing with BK and Dr. Ruth. Dr. Ruth comes up to me maybe about my belt buckle. She's tiny, all of 4 foot nothing.
Well,
And,
also you're a giant, so let's not, let's be fair.
well, I'm not that big, 6'7", but it was long and short of talk radio. Because, I mean, she had BK had this all done for a press release and everything because we were going to syndicate the story behind the story, and she got like 33% as she would have gotten it because it was a big syndication deal, but it was something called Clear Channel was doing the syndication. Well, I read the fine print. There were certain things they wouldn't allow me to talk about. And I saw that immediately. I says, BK, I can't do this. The whole purpose of the story behind the story is to talk about things you're not supposed to talk about. I'm not going to be censored, period. And she was very upset that she lost quite a bit of money. I won't tell you how much, but
And she was only the first of a long line of notches on your belt buckle, as far as am concerned, of
well,
incidences of standing up for truth.
Well, we had Mr. Bill Cooper, ex-Navy intelligence. I had him on about once every month or so. He always had good things to talk about. I got to tell you, I didn't believe everything he was telling me. It was pretty hard for me to swallow. My rabbit hole only went so deep back then. But I remember in July and then again in August of 2001, Bill Cooper telling me there was going to be an attack on the World Trade Centers. His intelligence network, his sources they're still active. We're keeping him informed. He said it's going to be that, but he says it's going to be blamed. And he knew all about the Project for a New American Century, PNAC. He said then it's going to be a pretext to make Israel greater and make Israel expand their circle of influence. He said the Project for a New American Century, the PNAC, was not about American growth and sovereignty. It was about Israel's, and that's exactly he was so absolutely right on with that.
And he
And
was so murdered for that very shortly after 9/11. And those who don't know, Bill Cooper had a radio show called Hour of the Time. He also authored a book called Behold a Pale Horse, which is available for free PDF download at the website hourofThetime.com.
so here when it went down on September 11th, I was so shocked. My wife can testify on the morning of September 11th, watching it unfold on every news channel and every station really was carrying it. I says, "Damn, Bill Cooper was right." I didn't want to believe he was right. I didn't. So I called him the very next day, okay, and I said, "Wow." He says, "I told you, but here's now our job is to expose these BASTARDS. I can't say the word. You know what I'm." He was so upset. He says, "I tell you, he knew who it was. He knew very well who it was, and it's not just the nation of Israel behind it, the Mossad. It's who controls them above that. You got to get the
Fight not against war. Excuse me. We fight not against flesh and blood.
yeah, the principalities and powers of the House of Rothschild, the Illuminati, the illuminating ones. He understood that. To deal with that reality, he did tip the bottle. He was many times I would talk to him, and he could tell he had a few, and I couldn't talk to him when he's had a few drinks because he was, he was upset and angry. But I'll tell you what he's his. There's a fellow you need to contact. I'll have him contact you. He's from Finland, which is again part of the Russian circle there.
The one who did the drawings.
The Russian, he's a demolition expert.
I've
Okay.
seen the drawings and I've evaluated the research. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Okay. He sent them to me. That they got posted on the internet. I posted them, Alex. I'm the one that posted those. Okay. Because what happened was he sent me this packet. He claims he was contacted by Silverstein and Company to say how to basically they wanted to demolish the buildings and the select buildings because they were too high in asbestos.
Yeah, turning out to be a combo package of both planted thermate and micronukes at the bases, aimed up thermically in a conical fashion. I know the whole drill.
Yeah, he says as one of the top three demolition experts in the world. He says, and again, he talked to me on the phone. Only he would only call me back, and he only last 15, 20 minutes, and he reestablished another call. He was paranoid that he would be taken out for what he knew. He knew he was in trouble. But he thought his best defense was to be offensive and to spread the word and tell what he knew. And it would have definitely pointed the finger at Silverstein and that whole group of cabal at the top. I mean, it would really be amazing to expose it as a Pearl Harbor event, a false flag that it was. So I'm sitting here, my head is just spinning. I mean, this was like, wow, this is huge information. So I told him you gotta come on, tell your story on my radio show. He says okay. So he would only call in. He says I'll have to go only for 10 minutes and I have to break and then I have to come back. I know the particulars. He says I can't stay any place for longer than 10 minutes. He says they'll track me and I'll be dead. That's how paranoid he was. But he wasn't paranoid. Bill Cooper was saying no. This guy has the key. He can blow this whole thing out of the water. It was
Oh,
like
it was very much for real, and you and I have both seen this in other instances. Let's not even go there, but yeah.
so. To make a long story short, he's on my radio show. He's doing this, and the people in the station they're looking at me through the broadcast window, just like with oh my stars. Their look on their faces were like, holy mackerel, is this for real?
Yeah, the name Moshe comes to mind.
Yeah, yeah. So what happens is we're in the 5 minutes he's going to another phone or location. I don't know what was happening, but he was going to call us back. So we're waiting for the phone to ring. The phone ring. It was him. He calls out, and guess what happens? The power goes out of the station. The broadcast stops. The broadcast stops. Whoever they have the ability to shut off our radio signal.
So that's like a usual suspects move where somebody went and just like shut down the entire power grid for your block. Kinda.
That was the last show that I broadcast on live radio because I was not allowed to go back on. The FCC or whatever it is, the broadcasting licensing, they were going to pull the station's ability to broadcast, pull their signal. And I said, my gosh, we're not under free country. If this is the control that they have, and they're listening, whatever agents they had listening to this station, and I'm telling you, the flood of hate mail that came pouring in from that. It was only like a 20 minute of a 2 hour broadcast, Alex.
All right. Well, we have, out of our 2 hours, we have a little over 40 minutes left. Are we going to talk about Pizzagate, or do we want to?
Well, this ties in. Let's continue. We got to
All right.
finish up our discussion
Yeah.
about this because, believe me, this is part of the WikiLeaks documentation that was there in Podesta's emails. They're knowing this stuff. This is all tied into the this whole cabal. Believe me. Okay. All right. Here's what Mr. William Smith writes in his book, December 2nd, and this is again exactly what this Russian documentary film. It's like the script is written by William Smith here. Okay, December 2nd, 1945, 1946, just before the start of his expedition, Admiral Byrd at a press conference said, "quote My expedition is military in nature." He gave no further details. So at the end of January 1947, about this time of the year, right now, full-scale aerial reconnaissance began surveying the Antarctic region in what's known as on the maps as Queen Maud Land. And that's exactly where the Russian Orthodox priest Kirill, the patriarch Kirill, he landed and gave a ceremony, a blessing of ceremony of that land. Okay, that's Queen Mon land. That's exactly where the Russians have say that they have control now. That's where they're at. Okay, quote: It all went to plan in the first weeks. Tens of thousands of photos were taken. Suddenly, the inexplicable happened. The 6-month expedition was suddenly terminated after only just 2 months. That's a historical fact, folks. 6 months, only 2 months later they came back. They blamed the officials. The official story was an unprecedented turn of events. The weather became nasty. They were starting to get iced in. That's the official story. That's BS story. Believe me. Okay,
The reality is they found the dome.
okay, yeah. So they fled the Antarctic coast. It was a real fast retreat. This is again from the book. I quote: They lost a destroyer. They lost nearly half of their carrier-based aircraft, and they lost dozens of sailors and officers. Now, the commission investigation before the U.S. Congress, and this is in the congressional record. I verified it and validated it. Admiral Byrd said this following the following statement, and I quote: "In the event of another war, America can be attacked by an enemy that has the ability to fly from pole to pole with incredible speed." Now, that's in the congressional record, Alex Studer.
I call them critters.
Well, listen, who has that ability? This is 1947 that he made his report to Congress.
Yeah, well, they're to me they're critters, but to biblical students they're agents of Lucifer, and they're dominions, and they're offspring, and they're, as we call them, TDEs, transdimensional demonic entities. And these are the beings that we think are ghosts or spirits or anything other than what they really are, because again, they're the masters of deceit. But that's why I just call them critters.
Okay, so let's go back into William Smith's book here. Quote: "What made the Americans flee?" Yes. Here's the reality. In 1945, now again, this is 18 months, a year and a half before Admiral Byrd's expedition. In 1945, 2 German submarines entered Mar del Plata port in Argentina. So imagine you're here, the Mar del Plata, Argentinian port city. 2 submarines enter in, and they come into the docks there basically and surrender to the authorities. But these were not any ordinary submarines. They were part of what the so-called Führer convoy. See, this was a top secret fleet fulfilling missions. Details have remained a secret until now. They've just been declassified. The submarine crews were reluctant to cooperate with authorities. Even so, the Americans that were sent down to Argentina learned a few things. The commander of U-boat U-530 spoke of his involvement in an operation codenamed Valkyrie 2. Now, Valkyrie 1, what was that, Alex? You remember that? There was a movie made about Valkyrie 1. It was the assassination attempt on Hitler in his bunker or in his command post.
So
Valkyrie,
we are told.
yeah, well, that's pretty much accurate because the papers that I have in the book Hitler's War by David Irving documents all that.
That this is true, and I'm going with David Irving on that.
Valkyrie 2 is the to keep Hitler safe is the whole idea of Valkyrie. It's the second is to basically put the Fuhrer in a safe haven at the end of the if the war was going badly, which it did. 2 weeks before the war's end, the U-boat U-530 left us. There was an underground port there in off Germany, heading for the shores of Antarctica. On board of the submarine were passengers with faces covered in bandages. Okay, well, who could those have been? Well, they were the top Nazi regime. They were covered with bandages to keep them from knowing who they were. Okay, as well as priceless Third Reich relics. The commander of the other surrendering U-boat, U-977, name of Heinz Schaefer, later testified that he followed the exact same route. It was found that the German submarines went to the Antarctic, but why there? So the history of Antarctica needs to be explored. Do you know who discovered Antarctica in 1820, Alex?
I'm going to say Captain Cook.
Close. No. Antarctica was discovered by two Russian explorers, Gelenkshchman and Lazarev. Their images are in the book here. They're Russian naval commanders. Okay, so
Very interesting.
this is why Russia is claiming this. This is where the Russians first discovered it. This is why they
Well,
have
but then
sort of
again,
claimed.
Captain Cook did log what 70,000 miles, uh, uh, transversing the Arctic shelf.
Well, yes, but that he never discovered the continent. It was not in his logs. He didn't go to the furthest region. That was the Russians that did that. So here
Right.
we go. Okay, the 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 Germans then became very interested in the Nazis instead. In January of 1939, this is in the documentation, two catapult-controlled airplanes. They had this ship that came out and they'd shoot these. They didn't have an aircraft carrier. They shot them off on catapults. The the Passat and the Boreas took off from the deck of the Schwabenland, the ship that was down there. They began patrolling. These aircraft began flying over Queen Maud Land. In the 3 weeks of this, Luftwaffe pilots with metal pennants marked with swastikas managed to secure for the Third Reich a full territory the size of Germany. They christened it and named it New Swabia. And this is all going on in 1939 when America was still in the coming out of the Great Depression, and they really didn't give a rip of what's going on down there. America didn't care as
Nor
far
did
as
they have access to any knowledge. I mean, we didn't exactly have like satellite cable TV back then.
so the captain of the Schwabenland, his name was Captain Alfred Richer. There's a picture of him here. Is a fact. Here is what he wrote, and this is in the archives. The Russian government has the archives. They got out of the Berlin bunkers, right? Quote: I have completed the mission entrusted me by Air Marshal Göring. For the first time, German aircraft flew over the Antarctic continent. Every 25 kilometers, we dropped pendants covering an area of about 600,000 square kilometers. That's about the size of Germany. That's a large amount of land on the northern facing tip of Antarctica, of which three and a half million square kilometers were photographed. Goring's flying aces have done their job. This is in his notes. then it goes on. Then the mission then was passed to the Fuhrer's top U-boat commanders, the Sea Wolves. They were commanded by Admiral Karl Dönitz, and in secrecy, reporting only to the Fuhrer, okay, and Himmler. The U-boats set course to the Earth's and the Antarctic shores. Now, Karl Dönitz, in a briefing, he came back, and this is in 1941, told Hitler and the high command in Austria. This is in the record, quote, "My submariners have found a true paradise on Earth." That's in the record. Now you know why Russia wants to be there. They
And well,
know this.
it matches up with the advent of the Bell aircraft
Now, yes, okay, let's not
and
let's
their anti gravity, or assuming gravity is real, their propulsion, electromagnetic propulsion technology. Let's put
yeah,
it that way.
let's not jump ahead because that's exactly what Smith goes into next.
I'm
Because
sorry for jumping ahead,
no,
but that's how I roll.
yeah, in 1943. Now keep in mind when this was found in 1941 and the report was made. Russia and Germany were allies. Okay? When did Russia and Nazi Germany, what, nobody really knows why they had a falling out. Russia was communist. The Bolsheviks were in charge. What was going on? What was their unity? And what caused in 1942 and 1943 for them to become enemies and have Hitler attack on the Russian front? 1943. This is the peak of the Russian war there on the Russian front. Again, we have Admiral Dönitz back into Austria he was flown in to give a report. Here's what he said. It's on the record in his report. Quote: "The German submariner fleet is proud. At the other end of the world, we have made an impregnable citadel for our Fuhrer." Now, back then, the Grand Admiral of the German Navy's fleet were only understood by a very small circle of insiders. But see, when the Russians took control of the bunker and found all this intelligence, then the OSS was involved. Again, this is all part of what was going on in Washington during the time. When you have Truman being involved with and working with the Russians, this is why Admiral Byrd was this is what his mission was, to find and destroy this this base. There was
And
no
ladies
doubt
and
about it.
gentlemen, there's actual video of him on television in, I believe, the year 1952, talking about his expeditions in high jump and elsewhere. You can look it up on YouTube. Do so before they disappear.
Well, there's also, if you Google up, there was a like 2 hour documentary that was cut down to 1 hour documentary, and it's on YouTube. But it was the official documentary on Operation High Jump, filmed, and all these things we're talking about was there, and it just shows the mass scale of the operation itself. But then, about halfway through the documentary that I've watched, Alex, there's a really amazing thing that they show all of these planes from the carrier taking off and doing systematic sweeps, going further and further inland on the continent, and they report back, and this is in the documentary. They were related because there was a whole section of the Antarctic coast or inside that was completely free of ice and snow. In fact,
Right. Yeah, they found lakes and greenery and more foliage. I'm very aware of all of that.
they came in and landed, and the water temperature was a freshwater lake, and it was like 74, 75 degrees. The water itself, and it was like a an area of greenery. It was tropical almost in nature. They were stunned. This is in the documentary made in the 1950s. Okay?
Yes, right. But you won't see that on tonight's news.
So here's what William Smith goes on, and this is verified by that documentary. Quote, back then the Grand Admiral of the German naval's fleet's words were only understood by a very small circle of insiders. Today we can only hypothesize what the Grand Admiral meant. Recently, huge underground lakes have been found. The lake's temperature is 18 degrees Celsius. Located above the water surface are dome-like vaults filled with warm air. So he's saying that from these heated lakes, a constant river of warm water, probably geothermal in nature, flows into the ocean. These underground rivers uh, formed large underground ice tunnels, perfect for construction of secret bases. From the ocean's edge, any submarine could easily pass under the coastal ice into the tunnels, immune from storms and polar cold, totally hidden from outsiders and out of the enemy's reach. If the Germans had to decide on a location for a secret base or make a secret zone that seemed from the outside to be totally inaccessible, especially during the summer months in the northern latitudes, the polar zones, including Antarctica, would be a wholly suitable area to find this level of security. So, again, the code name for this Antarctic base is in the records that were confiscated and came into the possession of the Bolsheviks, the Russian army. It was codenamed Base 211, Base 211. And in the archives, the start of 1939, regular trips were made between Antarctica and Nazi Germany. There was a specially equipped and modified research vessel. They called it the Swabia. Mine constructing equipment, other machinery, including railroad tracks, trucks, giant tunnel building mills. This is all in the records of Nazi Germany. Were transported to Queen
Right.
Mount.
Thank you, Bechtel and Rand corporations.
Mm-hmm. Well, by 1942, when the war was starting to turn against the Germans, transfer of inhabitants to New Swabia, they called this there the New Swabia, had begun, including scientists, engineers, high levels of the Nazi Party and German state. Certain secret industrial technology were also transferred from Germany. Now, of course, this is where Operation Paperclip enters into the picture. Post-war, the Americans recruited German scientists to work in the United States. That's absolutely true. It's very well documented, called Operation Paperclip. But when they had the records and resumes of thousands of the more highly qualified specialists in the Third Reich. They just
Like,
simply vanished. The Russians
like,
didn't know where they went. Nobody knew.
except for Werner von Braun.
Over 100 submarines had also vanished. 100 submarines were off the charts. They didn't know where they were. So here's the OSS, later become the CIA. Alan Dulles had full access to all this information, believe me.
Okay,
So, yeah.
question.
Hmm.
Is there any relation to the Gary McKinnon deal on any of this?
There is, but that's a whole other subject, really. Yeah, it ties in. But see, this is where we're coming from, Alex. You see that it's in conjunction with, you know, I did a whole show on the books that have been written, the documented evidence that FDR knew full well about the Japanese Expeditionary Force. There's no doubt about that. He was in constant contact with his buddy Stalin. They were funded and financed by the same people in New York City. That's the reality of this. So the Russians
Right.
then, the KGB and Putin
Okay.
is high level KGB. They know what's going on down there.
Oh, you're not. You're preaching to the choir here, but you're also dealing with a guy who had to deal with General Jeremiah, and I don't trust that guy. So sell me on all of this.
Well, let's not go there because it's not. you know, I
Yeah,
don't think
yeah.
that,
I'm
you
just
know,
saying,
that's a
yeah.
different topic, a different subject,
Okay,
Alex.
good,
It
good.
really is.
Okay, good.
We're not talking about that, but we are talking about what really happened there on Operation High Jump. Now, here is here is what is documented again in this film by the Russians, but the documentation is now full scale. It's been released. What happened on February 26th of 1947? What caused the expeditionary force of High Jump to come in, and everything's been labeled basically need to know high top secrecy. But here was written by the pilot, a pilot named John Sierson. John Sierson released this documented history of what happened and what he witnessed. Let me just read to you what he wrote and testified to. Again, this happened on February 26th of 1947. There was a very heated dogfight in a battle. Okay, he saw these strange disc-shaped objects come out of the water. Okay, and here's what he says, quote, "They flew vertically out of the water in a fury, slipping between the masts of our ships with such speed that the airflow perturbed and dislodged our main radio antenna. I didn't even have time to blink an eye. The two corsairs from the Casablanca were slain by some kind of mysterious ray shot from the nose section of these flying saucers. They then dived into the water near the ships. At this time, I was on the Casablanca's deck and saw it as plainly as you now see me. I didn't understand. These objects flew silent as they went between the ships underwater like a satanic beast spitting deadly fire. Suddenly, I saw our destroyer, the ship Murdoch, which was 120 feet away from me. The flames flashed. It took a hit and began to sink. So, what he's describing here is these flying discs go underwater and they're shooting these beams, and that's what destroyed the Murdoch.
Yeah, well, I call them critter craft, as I explained earlier about critters. They have to move in some sort of vehicle, which I call a critter craft. And my understanding of a critter craft is a very very form shape shifting kind of object. So much so that we can even perceive them to look like actual airplanes and or helicopters and or other objects. And I know how strange that may sound, folks, but if you look on YouTube and just Google, just look up fake planes and add to chemtrails, the whole thing. I mean, we're not talking about that right now, but there's a lot of footage that will raise your eyebrows, folks, and I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, well, let's just go back to Syrson. Let's keep focused on what he's saying. He says after when the Murdoch began to sink, the lifeboats were dispatched to the disaster site from the other ships. But this only lasted the firefight only lasted 20 minutes, and then they left. The saucers again dived under the water. We evaluated our losses. Everybody witnessing it he says all of the command were terrified. That's how he just defined it. Terrified! Exclamation! 4 exclamation points. Now, so the question that William Smith in his book brings up: who flew these? Who do these flying saucers belong to? And if they had that much firepower, they could have destroyed the entire fleet, but they didn't. They just made a point and they let them retreat safely. They let them get away safely. So this is the questions this book brings out, and well, very much so. There's after World War II, and you can see this in many documented books, and look on the internet or whatever. But there's books published in the 1950s about this. Nazi secret archives, they proved that German scientists had actually engaged in development of disc-shaped aircrafts. Maybe they were Nazis that were flying these, maybe not. Maybe it was some other extraterrestrial. Who knows? But the bottom line is this happened, and it's been shut down. There's no discussing it. There's no talking about it. If you even think about it, you're kind of a crazy nutcase to believe in reptilians and all this stuff.
Yeah,
uh,
or pizza.
Pizzagate. It goes back to who and what is the Anunnaki Society of the Third Reich. And look who's involved with this. And this is what William Smith gets into in this next section of his book. Who was SS Reichsfuhrer Himmler? Why was he the most powerful? Really, in the book Hitler's War, you look at Project or Valkyrie, the code name for the assassination. They made it clear that unless Himmler was killed too, they didn't want to even do it. They were more afraid of Himmler as much as Hitler because they were so much the power base of Himmler was going into the Anunnaki structure. See,
I would suggest that anybody who's interested in the discussion that you've been having, if they're so inclined to dive deeper, should first buy the book by author Edward Henry, who you've had on the show several times, the book entitled The Greatest Lie on Earth, and then go to chapter 15 and read the chapter NASA and Freemasonry. I think pretty much all you need to know is right there.
yeah, that's very much a part of this, but goes back into the book goes into the Piri Reis map. I want to talk about that too because that cannot be dismissed as just coincidence. Piri Reis, Pirireis, Piri Reis map, the map which stunned modern explorers and scientists. Okay, because see in the German archives is replicas of this map. It was this Piri Reis was a Turkish admiral in the early 16th century, in the early 1500s, ladies and gentlemen, 300 years before the Russians discovered Antarctica. This map is very, very detailed, but guess what? It's not covered in ice. In his map notes, Admiral Piri Reis wrote that he drew it from numerous sources that date back 3,000 years ago. Okay? Doesn't have an ice cover. The U.S. Air Force specialist that saw it coming on the Piri Reis map, quote, the coastline was plotted on this map before it was covered in ice. The thickness of ice in this area today is about 1.5 kilometers. We do not have any idea how this data could have been obtained in the year 1513. The international experts gave the Piri Reis map a thorough examination, concluded it was more precise than our modern 20th and 21st century maps. Seismic analysis confirmed the fact, which scientists until recently were unaware, and that is that the mountains of Antarctica, once considered a single massive, are in reality separate islands, just as stated on the old maps. And that wasn't even known until just the last decade, that these mountains are just islands. Amazing stuff here. So, what's going on down there to bring Russia into the picture to the point where they're doing this documentary exposing it? They have this massive base right exactly on the height of Queen Maud Land, right exactly
And
where the
all the
Nazis were.
while, this giant continent that we're supposed to be talking about is not represented in the United Nations logo.
Well, suppose this is this, as William Smith goes on to conjecture that this could very well be the lost continent of Atlantis. That it looked like it was part of the land masses in the documentary film. It's very well ties into the coast, the the area of the large landmass. It fits like a puzzle piece. And there's a Nova documentary film about people that some scientists have gone on there and actually drilled down into the ice shelf and found amazing remnants of mosses and leaves and ferns. It was a tropical vegetation there that's way down past the ice shelf. See, something's going on there.
Well, I find it interesting that nobody knows anything more than what's deeper than 8 miles below the surface. No successful drilling venture has ever penetrated beyond 8 miles, which is equivalent to 12 kilometers. So beyond that, we really don't know. So, assuming, we're on a globe and we have a molten core, let's also remember that once metal melts, it loses all its magnetic properties. The explanation really begins to break down fairly quickly.
Well, what's interesting in this book by Smith is now we get into the work of Victor Schauberger, okay, the so-called water wizard of Austria, and how he was pressed into service in July of 1934. Now, you look at also the what's called the Thule and Vril secret societies of Nazi Germany. They're tied into this Ahnenerbe expeditions. I mean, you got uh, again Werner von Braun was very much involved in this, as you brought up before, the Thule and Vril societies. All right, what Schauberger had come up with, and with his water separation, water becoming it's such an incredible substance when you see the power that it creates. Not only we know about hydrogen bombs, right, thermonuclear, but there is cold fusion technology with water that can make it power such things as a flying saucer. This is
It's
what,
known as Brown's gas. And
yeah.
as far as nuclear is concerned, I'll just interject. So we are told.
So what happens with Schauberger's work, and then you talk about the prototypes of the flying disc, the Bell saucer. Those things are all here in this book. It's amazing. What did the Nazis actually design this themselves, or was it what they did they explore into that base and find something in the inner Earth? Now that goes back to again what I want, and I this is getting into areas that we may just be visited by some folks here because they don't want this information out. I gotta tell you, one of the stories I was working on when I was doing the story behind the story live on the radio was exploring the secret diary of Admiral Byrd on his Arctic exploration. Okay, just look it up, folks. The secret diary of Admiral Byrd in the
Not exactly
in
so
the polar.
secret anymore. I mean, I've read it, and so have
Yeah,
many
well, of
others.
course, it's
Yeah,
not secret now, but back then it was, Alex. That's what I'm talking about. Stay focused with me, okay? All right.
I'm with you.
Okay. The story is amazing. He says he flew under the cover of the big fog bank. Okay, so he's flying above the fog bank, and suddenly the airplane pilot and his co-pilot, which and Admiral Byrd was in the plane, flew into this incredible. Suddenly, they were in a um, jungle setting. It just blew them away, and they the diary explained that there was a two flying discs came out and put him into a tractor beam and brought him into this structure, and there they were interviewed by what looked like Nordic Germanic race people, and they even had you know Nazi type of identifications. It was a bizarre story, incredibly bizarre, even to the point they say where they saw a woolly mammoth there grazing in the foliage, this type of stuff. I mean,
Right.
it sounds so incredibly ridiculous, and it has to be.
Dated the year 1947.
Yeah. So they had this, and then Admiral Byrd does Operation High Jump. So there's a connection. So well, in my digging, Alex, I've I have a source in D.C. who he said, well, look, there's one surviving member of that. He was a young air pilot. He was the co-pilot. He's still
I
living.
just want to say that also, folks, 1947 is the year that Roswell supposedly occurred. So just keep that in mind as we keep going here.
So we fly, got his address, went down with, I took a video camera and a tape. He lived out just outside of Phoenix. Contacted him, went in, and he was a nice enough. He was in his 80s, as I recall, and he was just like, well, he liked to talk. He was, but he was just a nice, kind gentleman. I said, were you the wingman on the on this flight with Admiral Byrd? He said, yes, but I can't discuss it. I took, I raised my hand and swore an oath not to talk about it. I said, well, can you not talk about it? Can you just nod your head yes and shake your head no? You're not talking about it. You're not violating the oath. Would that work for you? He says, I will do it, but not on video. And you won't tape me, but I'll tell you. Yeah, I'll shake my head yes or no. So I basically pulled out the diary, read the diary. Were you on this plane? Yes. Did you enter into this? He shook his head yes. Up, nodded his head yes. Was this a forgery, a hoax? The diary? He shook his head no. And we went on, and he verified everything without physically telling me, so he didn't violate his oath. I did that interview. I drove back to southern Utah to my home in Cedar City in a state of shock with that interview. I says, "Holy cow, the world is much different by far than you ever agree." Because I asked him, I says, "Why is it that if this exists, why don't surely commercial airline pilots flying over that area can see that entrance and things?" He says, "No, no, no, no. You don't understand. That is." He says that's area that no commercial pilot flies over that. It's a no-fly zone, strictly
Right.
enforced. He said that.
Exactly why there's no direct flight from Cape Town to Melbourne or Sydney. You have to go through Dubai first.
So he goes on and explains, look, that area because of, he says, there is there when you have a very cold air mass hitting a warm tropical air mass, what do you get? I says, well, that's called fog. He says, yeah, a very dense fog. And that covers a large area of that northern land. He says, you can fly above it, but when you look down above it from the air, it looks like just a mass of snow covered up nothing. You don't see anything until you get to a certain point where and then you just suddenly it's a different world.
And that's, folks, how they explain the existence of Greenland.
Yeah. So I mean, there's other documented. I've in this research time, that I've gotten books on the subject. There's actually published accounts of two Norwegian fishermen of my father and the son that were up further above Greenland, doing. There was a they were past the iceberg stage in the middle of the summer. They went up late summer and went up and they entered into this land. They said that, and this is all documented. They actually spent 2 years traveling through this land, and they're documented. They actually came out at the southern Antarctica area, and they came in and were rescued by some other fishing boats. They came back and were debriefed, and were just labeled completely nuts. They're completely crazy. Yet there was no doubt that they were Norwegian and they were started out in Greenland. Nobody could explain how they got all the way down to south of Argentina. I mean, this is crazy stories that are documented, folks. I did the research on it. There is so much we don't know. That's the point, I guess, Alex. And yet we can just see what's happening with the state of Russia right now, Putin. And I think there's a real reason why Putin and Trump are, buddies. Okay.
Oh, obvious Hegelian dialectic happening on the international scale of NATO versus BRICS, and this is all part of the grand design to, in my opinion, bring forth this World War III Armageddon, uh, Phoenix rising out of the ashes. But all that you said is so true, and I have only just words of admonishment. I'm so happy to be part of your world, and thank you for having me on.
Well, Alex, yeah, it's been good, but there's again the book is available on Amazon. You can actually download it on Kindle. But the documentary film that I posted there, again, it's in Russian. You can see the English subtitles. It's a little bit tedious to watch it that way, but it's amazing, folks. It's
And that's his website is atrueott.com.
yes. It's not posted on my website though. It's posted on the chat room, Alex.
Okay,
I'll
well,
be
I'll post it either to my blog or whatever, but we'll make
yeah
sure it gets circulated.
yeah. Just watch that documentary film. It's very precise, I think. And why are the Russians doing this, and yet nobody in America is really I don't haven't heard anybody talking about it on talk radio.
Well, again, I mentioned Hegelian dialectic, and all the world being a stage, we are merely players. 30 seconds.
Yeah, we're there, folks. We're at the end of the show. Again, thanks for listening tonight. Spread the word. Learn about what's going on in this great landmass. Just take some time and watch the documentary video that's on there, Operation High Jump. Again, why is it called High Jump? What are they trying to jump over? See, and again, the record is clear. Admiral Byrd said on the record, this is a military expedition. His orders were to find that German base and destroy it. That was cleaning up the loose ends of World War II, ladies and gentlemen. Something you haven't heard before, probably. But again, thanks for listening. Thank you, Alex. You have a great evening and great weekend. You be safe.
You too. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, beyond next week, ladies and gentlemen, be well. Keep your eyes wide open. The world is an amazing place. Thanks for listening.